Hi, my name is Chris Buck, and I am your child social studies teacher here at Cocalico High School. I've been teaching here for about 16 years now. This is my 16th year. This is my first job for teaching that I got right out of college. I went to Millersville University, graduated there a while ago, and a little too long ago now. Met my wife there. I'm married. We got married pretty quickly after college. I currently have four kids. Actually, today is my youngest son's birthday. But I have four children, ages 10, 8, 6, and 4. So they are certainly kind of my life and kind of dominate my time when I'm not here at school. And that's okay. That's a good thing, right? Kind of helps keep things in perspective, I think, when you have kids. But anyhow, so I graduated Millersville back in 2005. And then went on and got my master's degree. I'm currently working through in education, currently working through my second master's degree in public administration and law and public policy. And I teach civics and government, I teach world studies, I teach AP government and politics, and also teach AP European history from time to time. So I could have your student for any one of those, and I look forward to having them if I don't have them for one of those right now. Ultimately, what I want to do here is just kind of explain to you very quickly kind of the vision for all of my social studies classes, and then go over the syllabus with you very quickly so you can understand the content that we'll be covering as well as the expectations for the class. So overall, my kind of view of my job here, because again, this is social studies, so it's a little bit different than some other classes like math or science. We get into some sometimes controversial topics. I try not to stray away from them because, for better or for worse, all your students are growing up, and the state of Pennsylvania is going to consider them an adult pretty soon, and so is the United States of America. They're going to consider them an adult pretty soon. They're going to be doing very adult things, like getting a driver's license if they haven't already done so. Once they turn 18, they're going to be able to vote, all right? And that's a powerful thing. That's a powerful tool, and I try to explain that to all my students, no matter which class I'm actually teaching them. And so because they're getting to that age, one of the things that is kind of my job, besides teaching them the actual content. I want them to come out with a better understanding about who they are and why they believe what they believe. So we will kind of hit the controversial topics, more so in the 11th grade course than the 10th grade course, because again, they're a little bit older, they're a little bit closer to voting and stuff. But it doesn't mean that even when in 10th grade, in that 10th grade course, we still cover some controversial topics and some big, heavy topics, because unfortunately the world and world history has a lot of big and heavy topics in it, and just because they're uncomfortable doesn't mean that the students shouldn't be aware that these questions and that these situations haven't ever happened and don't exist. So I wouldn't say I use kid gloves, but of course we're doing it in a sensitive kind of way when these topics come up. But we talk about big topics like morality. Where does morality come from? Where does our morality come from? Is there absolute morality that we can 100% of the time say this is always wrong, right? And we have conversations about that, and if that's true, well, where did that come from? We'll have conversations about justice. We'll talk about laws. In all my classes, we'll talk about laws. Well, where do laws come from? What are they based off of? Well, every single law is based off of somebody's idea of morality and somebody's idea of justice. Every single law. So we have to kind of have that conversation, those big conversations about morality and those big conversations about justice, and that's kind of a running theme throughout the course, right? Because when we talk about freedom of speech or freedom of press, well, why are those things important? Who said that those things are right? How have we proven that these things are necessary to be in a free society? And when we're talking about what's happening in Africa, especially in world studies, well, we're looking at their history, and history is obviously made up of people. That's what makes it interesting. Nobody cares about names and dates. That's boring. I would fall asleep if that's all we were talking about. We're talking about people that really existed and people who had a belief. Well, why did they believe what they believed, and how did that impact how they interacted with their society? So we try to have big conversations like that, and so that's the kind of conversations I want to be able to draw out of your students. Now, I'll be honest, this is the most difficult it's been in my going on 16 years of teaching to do that, because we're virtual half the time, and even when I've got your students in front of me, they've got a mask on, I've got a mask on, and it just seems to inhibit some conversations. So we're getting there, even though we're through a couple weeks now of school. We're getting there, and we're starting to have more and more conversations. But one thing I would encourage you to do is encourage your child to have conversations in class. whether it's virtual, which we're going to be doing a lot more live streaming stuff here soon. We finally got some kind of things worked out that we can do that more, or whether they're in person. I need to have those conversations, and we need to have those conversations to make this class, one, interesting, but two, relevant to them and useful to them, so they can start to kind of form their own opinions and have their own thoughts. Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, he described people as immature, even adults as immature, if they only believed what other people had always told them. They kind of have a foundation built out of sand. When their beliefs that they think that they believe are challenged for the first time, I don't want that challenge to happen for the very first time when they're 25, because they've believed it for the first 25 years of their life, and now somebody really challenged it, and they never really thought about it. And now what happens to that foundation, right? It kind of breaks away very easily. And so I don't want that to happen now. So if we can start to kind of question some things and challenge some preconceived notions that maybe they have or that society has, and just kind of get to the root of, well, what do we really believe about some stuff, then they're going to be more prepared for the future. And so that's kind of really one of my biggest goals here, is to make them a mature person, not necessarily emotionally. They might always be immature emotionally, but I want to make them mature in the sense that they have a good understanding about why they believe what they believe. Even if they're only 15 or 16, they can still start to build that foundation using logic and reason and facts, right? And as well as some actual personal experiences, but making them start to become mature in that way. And I think that they will start to have an appreciation for having had that foundation start to be built. And oftentimes I'm building off of a foundation that you guys have already started to build in your own kids, right? But sometimes, and I've even seen this as a parent myself, sometimes kids need somebody who's not their parent to tell them the exact same thing, and then they're like, oh, okay. I don't know, maybe you've never experienced that. Maybe your kids listen to everything you ever said. I don't know. But I know with my own kids, sometimes they need some little outside voice, another coach or somebody to say the exact same thing that I just said. And all of a sudden, a light goes on, and they start to actually take it a little bit more serious. So that's kind of my goal for this class. Besides, obviously, I've got a lot of content that we're going to cover to give them a lot of knowledge to prepare them for the future. But I really want to prepare them in those other ways as well. So what I'm going to do next here is just very briefly, because I don't want to bore you, I'm going to quickly go over the syllabus so you have an understanding about the content and the class expectations for your particular student. Okay, so here's the syllabus for the World Studies course. And one of the things I would want to point out right away here is that my email is at the top, cbuck@cacalico.org. Please feel free to use that anytime. That is probably the best way to get a hold of me. I check that multiple times throughout the day, and so you will get the quickest response that way. If you'd like to have a phone call conversation, please feel free to call the school. That is certainly doable, but it'll probably happen after working hours once I'm actually done for the day, so to speak. So if you're looking for a quicker response, please feel free to email me. If you need a more detailed conversation, please feel free to give a call to the school. Anyhow, so the main point of this course here, and here's the course description. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by actually reading this all to you verbatim, but really the biggest point here is to try and have your students exposed to other cultures besides the traditional Western cultures, because they've been exposed to them throughout pretty much their entire academic career so far. So we're trying to kind of expand their horizon, so to speak, and focus on some other places that will, and I'll tell you specifically here in just a moment which places we're going to be focusing on. But we're really going to be talking a lot about like their social organizations, so how their family structures are kind of set up, if they have classes, social classes, what that looks like. We'll look at their customs and their traditions, the languages that are typically spoken there, and why they speak those languages in some cases, because there's a history behind that. Their art and their literature a little bit. Their religion, we will talk about religions in here, obviously. We will not be evaluating them as to whether or not they are the correct religion or not, but we're just going to talk about what they believe and why they believe it and where it kind of came from and how it impacts their culture. In some places, you're going to see where religion and their culture are almost the exact same thing, like in India, for example, and throughout the Middle East. In other places, it just kind of is almost like an additive to it, right? It's not necessarily overly important, like in Japan. It's not necessarily overly important, especially in modern day terms, but it's still there and has some impact. We'll also talk about their forms of government that exist there and their economic systems. Those we will be evaluating more in terms of, okay, well, what seems to work and what doesn't, right? So we're going to utilize the different social sciences like sociology, psychology, anthropology, history, political science, economics, and geography. And a lot of kids groan when they hear the term geography. And listen, I get it. But we're not just talking about like plateaus and peninsulas and all that kind of stuff, the geographic terms. We're going to understand why and how geography specifically impacts the growth and development of civilizations. So we'll help hopefully kind of make geography a little bit more interesting. And then, of course, we will talk about contemporary social and political events as well. We'll talk about why Africa specifically seems to has struggled, right? To be honest, well, why is that? There's a history to it. There's a geography portion to it, and then there's obviously a lot of current events that we'll talk about that as well. And again, this is where a lot of the real conversations will happen. Now, in terms of what we'll actually be talking about this semester, we just got through chapters 1 and 2 already, actually, and we are into talking about Africa now. So we'll hit Africa, we'll hit South Asia, which is mostly about India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. Then we'll move over to East Asia. We'll talk about China and Japan, and obviously, again, especially bringing in some modern day context with, okay, well, President Trump, for example, put tariffs on China. Okay, well, why? First of all, what's the goal for that? Has it been successful? Has it not been successful? And we'll try to evaluate those things in modern day kind of context. We'll hear China in the debates coming up probably between President Biden and Vice President Biden and President Trump. And so, well, what are they talking about? Why is this important? Again, trying to make this as relative to their life and everybody's life as possible. And then we will finish up our content with talking about the Middle East. So obviously, this has a lot of current day relevance. This is also where we will talk about the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and we'll kind of talk about where they all came from and the impact that they have, especially on this particular society today. But again, we'll bring in current events. We'll talk about the Middle East peace talks that have just happened, literally just happened, with the UAE recognizing Israel. Well, what does that mean, to these kids? And trying to get them to understand, well, this could hopefully be a potential game changer in terms of creating peace in the Middle East. We'll see, but that also will bring in the conversation about Iran and their impact on that region and how that region is actually divided. We see them as one kind of group that all agrees with the same stuff, and that's not accurate at all. And so we'll talk about what that means in a modern context. So that's the content. Class expectations, there's nothing revolutionary here. I expect them to show up on time, especially if they are virtual. Please make sure they are showing up on time because especially once we start doing more live sessions, that's like missing class time. Like they can't necessarily get that back then, right? I do want them to discuss things as much as possible. We'll try to have some debates in here. We'll have conversations in here. But again, my goal is to create, obviously, a very safe place for that to happen. And if it ever becomes an unsafe place, I will stop that. And if I don't notice it for some reason, this hasn't, I don't think, ever happened, but if for some reason I don't notice it and your student complains about what somebody said in class, please feel free to reach out to me. I never want a student to feel degraded because they express their opinion in class. And again, I don't think that that's ever happened, at least not that I've ever heard. But if you ever hear that, please let me know. Reach out to me, please, and let me know. So, yeah, the expectations are just do your work, show up on time. The assessments, what you'll see here is that there are weighted grades. I'm not doing that this year. So this part can actually just basically kind of be deleted. I already explained this to your student. It's just a point-based system here. The reason for this is because typically you will see exams are given a much higher weight. I don't necessarily feel comfortable doing that with how much has changed here. Instead of trying to finagle the weighting systems, it's purely a point-based marking period here where they're just getting points. There's no weights to different categories or anything. I still put things into categories so we understand what kind of tasks they are, but they are not weighted. This will still apply here. The final exam and the final project, they are each worth 10% of their entire grade. So we'll get to the final exam and we'll talk about that with them. That will start actually a little bit more than halfway through this course. They will be doing probably a comparative religions research paper. Again, it's just a research paper. It's not, obviously asking them which religion is correct. That's not my job. But they can do research on two different religions, and then kind of just again, it's just a relay of factual information. So that final project is 10% of their entire grade, and then they will have a final exam that is also 10% of their grade. For makeup work, late work, listen, they can always turn stuff in late as long as it's still in that quarter. If you ever see a 0 in there, it means that they didn't turn it in on time, but they can always turn it in for at least 50% of credit. And that's fantastic compared to a 0%. 0% will kill their grade very quickly. So if you see zeros in there, if it's still the same quarter, please remind them that they can still turn it in, and please let them do that. So that's it for this class. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. I will respond to that very quickly. And I very much look forward to the rest of this semester here with your students. And I hope that, again, this brought some clarity to what we'll be doing in this class. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. All right, take care.